When I was 17 years old, I read the Quran from start to finish. I had a lot of, being of Egyptian background, I had a lot of Muslim friends or family and uncles and aunties, and my experience of Islam was going to Eid, going to Ramadan with my parents, to our friends and our family homes, and sharing that experience as a young person, as a child. But then also as I grew older, I wanted to learn more about the faith. And so my experience of Islam was always a positive experience. But then of course, I came to know as an adult, as I grew older, much of the discrimination, the ignorance, the misunderstanding of the faith, and the discrimination that Muslims experienced, especially after 2001 and throughout that period. And I experienced it as well. People assumed I was Muslim by the way I looked in my background as well. And so from a very, very beginning, before politics, before any of that, I was always of an understanding of the importance to support my Muslim brothers and sisters through that period and up until today. And that goes for what's happening, obviously, to our Muslim brothers and sisters and our Christian brothers and sisters in Palestine. Despite some of the misinformation that you might be hearing and people wanting to politicise this issue, I was, and maybe you don't watch Parliament, but I was one of the first members of Parliament to speak up in the Parliament for Palestinian self-determination and statehood on the 10th of October, to call for a ceasefire in November. It's in the media, on radio and television. And also to push with the Foreign Minister and the Prime Minister for the Australian Government to change their position on these issues. That's all on the public record. But the important point I want to make about this is that many of us of goodwill would like to see an end to the war, an end to the conflict, and for justice for Palestinian people. My father and my grandfather fought in 1948, 1956, 1967 and 1973 in the Egyptian army. There was a long history of our efforts towards Palestinian justice and self-determination. And that's something I've tried to do and advocate for within the federal government, to make sure that the Foreign Minister and the Prime Minister are working towards that. And we've seen, obviously, a significant speech by the Foreign Minister only a couple of weeks ago about Palestinian recognition. So that work is important to me. It's close to my heart. And I know that many out there in politics will try and politicise this issue and use it for short-term gain to manipulate it. I don't care about the politics. I actually care about the Palestinian people. I want to see a Palestinian state. And the work that I'm doing within the Australian government, because when you're in government, you can actually make a difference, is to increase the aid and humanitarian assistance by 52 million, is to call for an end to the conflict, is to actually work on the reconstruction and to support those people who are in dire need. That's what I've been doing from the very beginning. And I'm also concerned about the impacts towards the Muslim community, the hatred, the ignorance that we see, the Islamophobia. Very important for us to protect and stand up and support the faith community, their mosques and their community centres, and make sure that we stand side by side with Muslim Australians, because you are just as Australian as any other Australian. And what I believe in for all of us is what we have built in this country, and you've been part of this when we talk about multicultural Australia. We've built something special in this country where you can free to practice your faith in Islam, you are free to practice your culture, that we all can live in a harmonious society. This is somewhat of a minor miracle in this country. It's not happened by magic. It's happened by the goodwill of leaders like Medan, by the imams, by the community members, who have fought hard to ensure that we can live in such a harmonious multicultural country. And many people are trying to rip that apart. We should not let that happen. We need to stand shoulder to shoulder to protect your right for your free faith, your faith to be practiced freely, and to stand by your side whenever there's any form of attempt to discriminate against Muslims. And that's what I've been doing since the beginning of my career. I wouldn't be standing here if it wasn't actually for one of my Muslim aunties, because at one of the Eid, I think it was Eid al-Fitr, I was a little 5-year-old. I was very hungry, so I grabbed some kaf, which is an Egyptian dish, and I put it in my throat. It got stuck in my throat. Hajja Farida, she pulled it out of my throat and saved my life. I was going blue. So I opened my life. I owe my Muslim auntie my life, and I'll always fight for my brothers and sisters in that. And we also have to fight to do the work necessary to build and rebuild this masjid, which is so important. You've already donated, you've already been so generous. I know Menon and I've met with the committee members much earlier than that, where I was trying to get funding for this beautiful building, the architectural building. Some of you will look it up on the website. It really is wonderful. It represents very symbolic around the faith, and it's such a beautiful architectural building. It will make such an attraction, not just for Muslims in the area, but for non-Muslims to come and understand what the faith is about, to wipe away their ignorance. And this will be